So good afternoon, learners. This is the first MOOC session for this NPTEL course on the psychology of language. Uh, I'm waiting for your questions. We have a few questions on this Excel sheet. I'll be addressing them. But if you have questions related to the course on the psychology of language, I welcome you to ask these questions to me. In the meanwhile, I'll also be talking about a little bit about what the course is about and what was the thought behind floating this course. So I'd welcome more learners to come in and ask questions which they have about this course. Now, the idea behind floating this course on the psychology of language was to understand the behavioral perspective of language, to understand what goes on in the minds of people when they communicate or when they use language. So the course was designed with a psychological viewpoint. So this is not typically a psycholinguistic course as such or a pure linguistic course. The course is about understanding the psychological framework which goes in understanding language. So a lot of people are joining and I'll ask them, these people to ask questions if you have. You can come online, you can put in your cameras, turn on your cameras and you can ask those questions which you have about this course. I guess this is the second week that we are presently in this course. And as I was addressing, I was trying to tell you what was the motive behind putting this course together. I've referred to a couple of books and both these books are mentioned in your NPTEL website. And better idea would be to watch the videos, also do the assignments properly, and also read the books a little bit. Since this is a master level course, a level which is above the basic junior level. So a good idea would be to read the books a little bit. Now, the way the course is structured is I have divided the course into 3 parts. Section 1 is the introduction of the course, where I have introduced both the difference between language and a full-fledged language and communication. So what are the difference between that? As in introducing to people what language is all about and how language is different from communication. And how language is developed as such in human beings. And the second section here, or the second topic here, is to understand the science behind the study of language. Since we're using a psychological perspective to understand language, so what I've tried to do is define the basic procedures or methodologies which is used for understanding language or doing experiments in language. The second section that we have is called the basic processes. There we talk about a little bit about language production and language perception. Also a little bit about basic units of language, for example, understanding what a word is and the basic hierarchy of how a language is built, right from phonology to morphology, to understanding how this morphology is the morphemes gather together to form something called words. What is the meaning of word? How are the words arranged? What are the rules of arranging these words using syntax, forming sentences, and so on and so forth. And further on, we come to the idea of advanced topics. So we look into the actual use of language. So basically, how sentences are formed, what are the rules guiding sentences. Further on, looking at how reading and writing works, and then looking at an especially interesting topic of bilingualism, which is basically interesting for those people who have two languages or who have two proficiency in languages. So all along, what I've tried to do in this course is that I have uh, uh, necessarily attributed down or shunt down the linguistic aspect to understanding language, and I have tried to introduce and tried to give a boost to the psychological explanations of understanding language. So we'll talk about more about this whole course or what course is about in a while. And since this is a live session where it is expected that whatever questions you have, you ask it to me, and I'll try to answer these questions to you based on whatever knowledge I have gained up till now. Uh, and if there is something that I'm not able to answer right now, what I'll get to do is I'll get back to you either through the message board or personally through an email. So there are three opportunities to ask questions to me. One is through the message board where I look at your questions, or a TE of mine, teaching assistant of mine looks at your questions and answers them. And if there is a discrepancy between what he's answering, I'll come in and I'll answer those questions. So it's not that the TE only maintains the course board. I also go through it once a week and look at questions and the answers provided to those questions. The other way to get in touch with me is to write me an email personally with their questions if you have any, and I'll get back to you on that. A third and more efficient way is using these live sessions where you are live with me right now. So we are talking in a live way. And if you have questions regarding any feedback, any suggestions, any kind of specific questions related to this course, you can ask me here. And what I can do is I can try and give a solution to your question. So I have a lot of people here, and I'd suggest them to start asking questions. Now, till the point of time you start asking these questions, I'll start taking some questions from this Excel sheet, the response sheet, which was circulated to people who are taking this course. And if they have questions, they could have put it here as well. So I have Tanya Singh asking me why the assignment one is not submitting. And I think I've addressed this question in the message board. It's something to do with the timing of submission or some NPTEL glitch. And I think people are addressing, the technical people are addressing this question. So there's not much from my side to answer this question. I also have Vansh Patel asking a question about how he would like to start a successful startup, or he would like to float a successful startup. I wouldn't say this is the forum to ask this question because the course is about psychology of language. If you are interested in startups or tips on startup, a good course would be to, a good idea would be to enroll to those courses who talk about business or business strategy and business management. There is a course of mine in consumer behavior where we can, or consumer psychology, where we look at the psychology, but that also doesn't fully satisfy the idea of how do you start a startup. So I don't think at this point of time I'm qualified enough to answer those questions on how to start a startup. I don't have a startup, and I think this is the best answer I can give at this point of time. I also have Milan Kundar, who asked this question of success in life, which gave him a better future. I'm not very sure how to answer this question because I believe success is relative, and this whole idea of a better future is also relative. So I subscribe to the philosophy of Vedanta, and if you have some idea about what Vedanta is all about, it talks about there is nothing called success or failure. There's nothing called better future, because future is future. So what you have right now is what should be the goal of it, and you have these particular ideas in Vedanta where they talk about Aham Brahma, which means that I am God, and those kind of philosophy. So um, I wouldn't call this a success, but I would call it living. And so it's up till now it's been good. So uh, if you be more specific about it, I can probably answer the question. Um, I also have Shakshi Yadav, who says she doesn't want to ask a question. Um, I have Harish Malik, uh, doesn't want to ask a question. So thank you for putting these questions or comments. And I have Kayalsvi, talks about importance of language in life. So this is a more important question, a more important question. So what is the importance of language in life? Yes. So even when language was not there, life was going on and people were living. But with the introduction of language, what happened is that we have a systemized way of expressing ideas which are understood among the users of language. So language makes your life uh, more organized and more, I say, more effortless. This is what language does to you. So it gives you those tools through which you can express yourself to people around you and communicate or express yourself in a much better way. So that is the importance of language. Having said this, understand that language has its own problem. Language is not something that the brain, the human brain or the brain as such developed with. It's an acquired ability which was put onto the brain. So those areas of Wernicke or Broca or other areas of reading and writing which you see, these are newly developed areas coming in from some 2000 to 3000 years before. Before to that, you didn't have this specific language area. So those, if you look at the primitive organisms, they use a system of communication, a system of exchanging ideas, which is called communication, which is very direct and very efficient. But with language, the problem happens is that in language, what we do is we take in symbols and we express ourselves. Now, these symbols are arbitrary in nature, and at times, or most of the times, it can be misinterpreted until and unless guided by certain rules. So, languages are guided by certain rules, and these rules are sometimes misinterpreted, and that can create a lot of problem. So, having said that, language has given us um, a better life, but on the other hand, it has also created a lot of problems for us. So it's a kind of a two-edged sword which can give you a better life, but on the other hand, it can also create problems. That is what the importance of language is. But having said that, it has definitely improved your life, or have definitely improved people's life in many ways. So these are the questions that I have on this particular sheet that was circulated to you for asking questions. I have a number of people here with me. What I would suggest is if you have questions regarding this course, you're welcome to ask these questions. And with whatever knowledge I have, with whatever studies I have done on this topic, uh, I try to answer uh, questions of yours in the best way possible. So over to you now, and I'll keep waiting here. I have tried to explain to you the idea behind floating this course, and it's your time now to ask a question. So I'm here. Uh, you can address the question to me. So anyone wishing to ask anything? I guess I'm audible to most of you. So any questions, people, learners, whatever you wish to ask, I'm sitting here trying to take a question. So if you don't have a question right now, you can think of a question You can ask those questions at later point of time. You can put these questions on the forum where I'll try to address those questions for you. You can write a direct email to me. There will be a second session about this course, a second online session. Maybe you have a question then and you can ask it there. Or if you have a question right now, you can start asking this question. So we have a limited time for this session. So I'll encourage you and suggest you to start asking your questions. Anything that you wish to know regarding the course, regarding the content of the course, I'll be happy to answer. I hope I'm audible to you. A simple yes and no would do it. Oh, uh, learners, am I audible to you? You can type in your message. You can unmute yourself and say yes and no. You can at least let me know if you can hear me. Okay, great. So somebody is listening. That's good to know. So if you have questions, please go ahead, ask your questions. You can, as I said, there are multiple ways to connect. You can connect with me right now. You can write me an email. You can send a question directly to the forum. You can wait for the next live update and then you can ask a question. Whatever question you have, it's not only questions. If you have some feedback that you wish to give, you can put this feedback. You can put in a suggestion if you want. I'm happy to uh, hear your feedbacks and suggestions. The ultimate goal is to for you to learn something out of it from the whole course. So whatever your suggestions, whatever your feedbacks, I welcome it here. So anything, learners, students, faculties, whoever is hearing to me, anything you wish to ask. I do understand that's quite early because we have just covered the first two sections, which is only explaining what is communication and language and the difference between language and communication, and a little bit about the history of language. And I think we have also started telling you about the science of language as such. So we will have another session where we'll dwell into more interesting topics and more detailed topics on language. For example, how is sound produced or how is language produced and how is language perceived. And one of the things that mostly people believe is that language is continuous in nature, where is non-continuous in nature, is discrete in nature, just like perceptual processing. But it's been found that language is rather continuous in nature, and that's one of the interesting things. So how is language perceived? How do people interpret things? That those things are interesting to know. How is language produced? That's also interesting to know. And further than that, as I said, an interesting thing is language consists of symbols which are arbitrary in nature, which stand for a particular meaning. So how is this meaning assigned and how people interpret this meaning? And these meanings or these symbols represents words and these words represent concepts. So how does that thing go about is what we'll learn in the section on words, and then how these words combine using certain kind of structure or certain kind of grammar or rules of combining grammar. And using certain structures to form sentences which convey meaning. So that is another thing that we learn. Besides that, we'll also learn about not only vocal language, but also written language. So what is written language? And from there, we'll proceed into looking at proficiency or deficiency of someone using a second language or two language, multi-language use. So people who use multi-language, what is the benefit of them and what is bilingualism as such. So this is the kind of sections which are still, which you'll still read about as you progress in this course. But for now, since we have only done two topics, if you have questions relating to these two topics or anything else related to the psychology of language or understanding the behavioral perspective of understanding language, I welcome you to ask your questions. You can obviously stop me anytime you want, raise your hands, or even without raising a hand, unmute yourself and start asking a question. So that is the procedure, because since you don't speak, so I'll be speaking most of the time. So somebody had a question, so could you ask it?
Sir, may I ask?
Yeah, sure.
Sir, in chapter 2, two codes are given P300 and N400. Sir, what does it mean?
Okay, so P300 and N400, these are something called event related markers. What is the meaning of this? So for that, I'll take you a little bit into psychology. Understand when a stimulus is presented to you, when an object is presented to you, this object is registered by your brain. And after this is registered, a response is generated to this stimulus. Let's say that I show you a word. How you respond to that word is uh, uh, measured in terms of electrical changes in the brain. Now, these electrical changes are further analyzed using statistical mechanisms, statistical tools, and also using ERP tools or your computational neuroscience tools. Now, what really happens is that the P300 is that component or that point which starts, or I'll try to explain it in a much easier way. Let's say that I show you a word right now, or two words right now. So we are playing a game in which there is a concrete word and there is an abstract word. And what your job is to uh, differentiate between a concrete word and abstract word. Now, my understanding is, or my what I would say is interest is to find out how quickly the brain can differentiate between a concrete word and abstract word. One way is to create a behavioral experiment where I'll give you a response key as you see a word and non-word, and press a particular key for a word and press another key for a non-word. But let's say that I want to understand how quickly does the brain makes a differentiation between a word and a non-word, or a concrete word and an abstract word. Now, P300 is known as a positive 300 marker, which means that after I show you these two words, which is a non-word or a word and concrete and abstract word, and 300 millisecond afterwards, after the onset of the word, the brain makes its first decision or the first distinguishing between the word and non-word. So what it's an attentional component that you have. The P300 is an attentional component. It's a positive going wave. Don't get into the jargons, or don't worry about the jargons. What it basically says is that 300 millisecond after showing you a word and non-word, or a word and abstract and concrete word, the brain identifies a difference between them. Now, 300 millisecond is a very less time, and so the brain doesn't even get a time to understand the meaning. So what happens is, just on the feature of the word or non-word, basically it works in terms of word and non-word, just on the way the letters are arranged, the brain makes its first distinguishing between a word and non-word. This is called the P300. N400 is similarly a component which is related to a later processing, which is meaning related processing. So 400 to 600 is meaning related processing, and 300 is more or less a attention related. Generally attention is 180 to 200 to 20 millisecond, but 300 is the most I'd say most approved component of difference between a word and a non-word in terms of its physical features. In terms of its semantic features or meaning features, if I differentiate between a word and a non-word, or if I want to know when the brain is able to distinguish between a word and non-word in terms of its semantics, in terms of its meaning, the 400 millisecond is the time that is generally taken. Now, this N and P basically means that where is the deflection? So word will create a deflection or electrical change in your brain. and a non-word word will also create a deflection chain. So when you are looking at the physical feature differences, it will be in the positive dimension. That is why you have P or for positive. And when you are looking at a difference in terms of meaning or semantics, it will be in the negative zone. So that is the N 400. So 400 millisecond afterwards, after you see the word, the first change in terms of semantics happens. And when P300 is that particular, P300 is not only for language, it's for a lot of stimuli, for objects, for complex processing, for memory related processing. It's a major component, but this component basically is an attention component. It says that this is the point at which the first attentional difference or the first I'd say form difference happens between two stimuli which are different. So I hope this is clear to you.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, I have another doubt, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Sir, actually, I got through the books and I find that there are three types of electric current generated by the brain neurons. There are alpha, beta, and delta.
Okay.
Sir, so far as focus is concerned, sir, I think beta is the best level of energy to attention the student. So how this is related to this P and N, sir?
So this alpha, beta, and delta that you're looking at, these are type of waves, right? Now, how are these waves classified first of all? So if you look at alpha, what it means is that if, so there are something called amplitudes and frequencies. And these waves are measured in terms of something called hertz or cycles per second. So we'll go with the idea of cycles per second and understand or imagine that for 1 second, if you look at a pattern of waves, and if between 0 second and 1 second, you have 8 to 14 of these changes, the sinusoidal changes, or these changes within a particular brain signal, you call it the alpha. So the range of alpha is 8 to 14. Beta generally are of two types. You have beta low and beta high. Beta low and beta high is anything above 14 hertz to 20, I think 2024 is beta high, beta low, and then you have above that is beta high. These are brain states, or these are wave patterns generated by the brain, which are generally in the active state. And then you have this delta and gamma. They fall on the lower range from 8 to 6 to 8 hertz and below that. Now, for concentration, basically, we should be able to, what the idea is, we should be able to suppress this alpha waves, right? And obviously, when you're suppressing the alpha, since betas are more than 14 14 changes in 1 second, or 14 above 14 cycles per second, you have to suppress this wave pattern. Suppressing means what? The brain slows down in a manner. When you are slowing down the brain, what will happen is it will have less number of changes per second, and it starts concentrating. So that is the idea of meditation or concentrating. What we tend to do is suppress the number of deflections that are happening. The more number of deflections that is happening in 1 second, what is happening is the neurons that are carrying this information, they revibrate very fast. And when they are revibrating very fast, what really happens is that you will not be able to concentrate. A lot of mental energy travels again. So while concentration or while attention, while you make somebody pay attention, you would like to suppress this to a limited level. So two questions are there. One, what is the meaning of this? This is the meaning of alpha, beta, gamma, and delta waves. And what things you should use for what electrophysiological parameter you should use for attention? You should be using a parameter of lowering down the alpha or creating a eye closed condition. So when doing an EEG, we generally take two different snippets of it, or two different readings. One is called eye closed and eye open. This is to balance out or create a baseline. So when you want somebody to concentrate on something, you need to suppress this activity, the neural activity, which is happening. I hope that's clear for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. So any other question if you...
Sir,
Yeah.
one more doubt in the that is language and brain. Here you have given, sir, hippocampus, amygdala, and basal ganglia are the playing main role in language acquisition and language processing. So far as limbic system is concerned, sir, hypothalamus is not given here, sir.
Okay, so hypothalamus, why is not given is hypothalamus is a combined area which also works for emotions. Hypothalamus generally, the whole limbic system or the whole limbic lobe is more emotional in nature. Obviously, it plays a role in language, but when we're discussing it, we're discussing as the primary areas. There are multiple subsidiary areas which tend to help you in language processing, right? So the main areas that we talk about is the hippocampus, because hippocampus forms memory or hippocampus forms processing of language. Beside that, basal ganglia is an additional area, which basal ganglia and hippocampus and as I said, the other area, I forgot. These are the main areas in language. Definitely hippocampus is there, putamen is there. These additional areas are also there in language. But what we were talking is, since this is kind of a very introductory thing, so it was just moving on, focusing on the main areas which are involved in language. And of course, this language has to do with cognition and memory and mostly perception. These hippocampus and basal ganglia and putamen and other areas are the ones which are primary. Of course, saying that the amygdala, the hippocampus not being involved is not that true, but yes, it plays a subsidiary role, not a major role in language.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Any other question if you have? Other people who are here? So I'm waiting for other people as well. If you are here and if you want to ask a question, please go ahead, ask a question. So learners, if you are interested, if you want to know something, you think I can answer that for you, please, I would request you to ask your questions, send in a feedback, give me a suggestion, uh, give me some kind of a review. All of them are welcome. If you are here, since you have registered for this course, you have come online, it's an opportunity for you. So why don't you go ahead and let's talk. We have like 10 or 15 more minutes for it. But if nobody asks a question or if nobody is interacting, I would probably end it earlier. So if you have a question, I'll give you a couple of more minutes. If you don't have, and if you think if you have a question, but you don't want to ask it here, or if you want to ask it personally to me, or if you don't have a question right now, or want to ask a question later on, sorry, what you could do is you could send me an email, put it on the forum, come to the next live session and ask a question, whatever way suits to you, do ask that. So a couple of minutes more. If you have a question, please ask. Otherwise, we'll go offline and you will have other ways to contact. Any questions?
Sir, the next class is held in which date, sir?
The next, could you repeat it, please?
The next class, live session.
The live session. Okay. So it's not planned as of yet, but I think in October, we'll have another session just before the examinations.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
In the meanwhile, also, if you want to ask questions, you just send me an email or put it on the forum. I'm there to answer your questions. So we can do that. If even before the live session, if you have a question, you are more than welcome to ask those questions to you. To me, sorry.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question, sir.
Yeah, please.
Sir, actually, we have got only 2 chapters, sir, and we are not getting sufficient time to go through it, sir. In the mid of the September, if another live session is possible, then it will be okay, sir, for us. That is my
That-
request, sir.
Yeah, sure. So as I said, live sessions are decided by NPTEL. So they are the ones who will be doing the live session. What you could do is, if you have a question in between, you can always send that question directly to me. Just go to my website. It's mentioned in the NPTEL thing, the website. And what I'll do is I'll answer the question for you. If need be, we can talk online and I can answer the question there itself. So not necessarily that this live session is the only way to connect. I'm available here, and depending on the time that I have, uh, we can decide a time and date, and of course try and answer your questions.
Sir, actually, we have a great privilege that we are learning from you, sir. That's why I'm, sir, interested to for another live session.
There will be a live session, and thank you very much for letting me know that it's good to learn. It's good always to have positive feedback. So whatever the questions are, even if it is not a live session, just put in the question, and let's see if I cannot answer your questions on let's say on the forum. We'll do an online among ourselves, and I can answer a question. So need not be a live session. This is just a mandatory part that we have to do for everyone.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you. So if there are no further questions, what I'll do is I'll leave this session. So all the best for your learning, and goodbye from this MOOCs studio for this live session. We'll meet again next time and take more interesting questions. So stay healthy and thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.